This is Theory of Change. I'm Matthew Sheffield. Thanks for joining me. In a generic sense, everyone knows that politics is about power. But when you look at how America's two major political parties use the power that they have, there's no question whatsoever that Republicans understand power politics, while Democrats have a much more passive attitude toward it. This has been true since at least 1964, when a dedicated group of reactionaries took over the Republican Party and installed their preferred extremist candidate, Barry Goldwater, and then began systematically eliminating any Republican who stood in their way. As they have gained power in the Republican Party and in American politics generally, this group of reactionaries has reached the culmination of their desire in Donald Trump's second presidential administration, in which he is pulling all the levers of power to cancel budgets, cancel people, and threaten anyone and any organization that stands in his way. In response, congressional Democratic leaders have largely resorted to writing strongly worded letters, which obviously isn't going to cut it. But what can and should be done? Attiah, my guest on today's episode, has been thinking and writing a lot about power and why it's necessary to protect freedom. She's a columnist at the Washington Post and is also the founder of Resistance Summer School, a new effort to teach the history of democratic rights movements, which she founded after Columbia University canceled another course that she had been teaching for them after the university came under dishonest attacks from far-right activists who were trying to censor students and instructors. I hope you'll enjoy. Theory of Change is part of the Flux Media Network, so go to flux.community for more podcasts and articles about politics, religion, media, and society, and how they all combine and intersect to affect the culture. We have paid and free subscription options as well, and if you are able to do a paid subscription option, that would be great. You can go to patreon.com/discoverflux, or you can go to theoryofchange.show or flux.community, where you can subscribe on that way also. And if you're watching on YouTube, please do click the like and subscribe button so you can get notified whenever we post a new episode. Thanks for staying in touch. Let's get into the program. And joining me now is Karen Attiah. Hey, Karen, welcome to Theory of Change.
Hey, Matthew. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you. So you've got a number of interesting things you are doing lately, but one of them is you've got a class that was canceled by the actual cancel culture of Donald Trump from Columbia University that you are teaching independently now. So why don't we start off? Tell us about that.
Sure. Yeah, it's been such a it's been such a wild time on so many levels. Yeah, probably most people might know me as a journalist and a columnist and editor for the Washington Post, but deep down inside, I've always wanted to teach. I've always wanted to be an academic. Actually, I ended up a journalist, but yeah, most people might not know my background is actually in international affairs. So I went to Columbia as a graduate student and wanted to basically like either work in the UN or World Bank or maybe, diplomatic service, that sort of thing. Uh, but that experience really made me question a lot about our systems, particularly our international affairs development systems. And while I was a grad student at Columbia School for International and Public Affairs, I definitely questioned, like, wait a second, why aren't we learning anything about how race intersects with development and how we see the world, how people relate to one another? And I definitely was aware that what we were being taught was a very, very, very not only Western centric, but a very kind of American centric view of the world. And I was going to school with people from all over the world. So I just saw that as a gap. And so ever since then, I was like, man, I would love to be able to teach what I didn't get taught as a student. So probably in the pandemic, yeah, Columbia was like, "Hey, would you?" SEPA specifically, the School of International and Public Affairs, was like, "Hey, would you like to come teach?" And I kind of did the Heisman on him, kept him at arm's distance for a little bit because I was like, "I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready." But I was working on a syllabus on race and journalism. So I developed a syllabus for about 2 years or so before I finally said yes, before I said yes to the dress, I guess, and decided to teach in 2020 for the spring of 2024. So a bit of context to that. I decided to come up with a course, yes, that explicitly looked at the development of kind of our ideas about race, like all the way from the 12th and 13th centuries to today, right? And looking at how this has always been a mediated process. So, part of how, at a very basic level, how we develop ideas about who is us and who is them, who is like us and who is not, is through what we read, what we watch, through photographs, all that stuff. So I basically explain to my students, particularly when it comes to American media, development of American media, that there's always been a link between uh, the relationship, particularly of white colonists and European colonists and settlers, with writing about non-whites without including them. And there's evidence and really great work done about how these early colonial papers actually made a lot of money peddling stereotypes, basically. So I ask a lot of my students, I'm like, this sounds familiar, right? So fast forward a couple of months, of course went well, and over enrolled, great reviews. And then I got a text message saying that my class was not going to be renewed for 2025. And obviously, I was crushed. I mean, I never quite got a reason, actually, whether it was, I mean, my class was over enrolled. I was also quite vocal about what I saw as Israel's assault on Palestinians during the time of the encampments and the protests that were happening at Columbia. So, and just in general, Matthew, I mean, I think I knew, I cover race. I write about race. I've written about the attacks on critical white race theory and anti-DEI, all of these sort of bogeyman attacks on anyone teaching about history, and in particular the history of different racial groups. So I think I always kind of had I don't know, a bit of not a cloud per se, but just an awareness of the political climate, even at a place like Columbia, right? I'd covered anti-CRT efforts in Texas, in Oklahoma, and in the back of my mind, I think I always knew they're going to try to push this campaign all the way to the top. And of course, as we've seen, it's reached the Ivies, right? So I think, they canceled the class. I was told to be quiet about it, basically. So I sat on it for a couple of months, didn't say anything. People were like, "You're going to hurt your career. Do you want to teach again? Don't, just wait it out." And then I saw, after Trump's victory, and then I saw the attacks on DEI. I saw the pressure on campuses to basically, basically stop any um, um, programs on diversity, on DEI, stop anything that could be considered anti-white, basically, if we're going to be real
Or
about it,
pro-Palestinian, yeah.
or pro-Pal. All of that to me is connected. I don't see these things as separate issues at all. So yeah, earlier this spring, I just was like, wait, why am I sitting around waiting for permission to basically do at the heart of what teaching is, me talking to a group of people? Like, at the heart of it, it's like we all teaching and education is just gathering a group of listeners, having a speaker, and transmitting, communicating to them. And I'm like, I don't need Columbia to do that. I can gather people under a tree, so. Yeah, I put it out in Blue Sky. Would anybody be interested in taking this version of this course? And honestly, I would have been happy with 20 people. I would have been happy with 30 people, and something like 2 or 3 thousand people responded. So I was like, okay, we're onto something, and just kept pulling on the threads. Put out an interest form. People were really willing to actually sign up, willing to actually, and what I did was offer it on a sliding scale, because part of the, I think, injustice of what I saw even teaching is just, not only are people going into crushing debt, right, to be able to afford an Ivy League education, particularly in a shaky job market, but then adjuncts, what a lot of people may not know is a lot of them are paid basically poverty wages and have no protections, no sort of benefits, right? I've met adjuncts who can barely pay their rents, but they're teaching at these elite institutions that are trading off of their knowledge and their labor in order to power the whole thing. So for
And
me,
who
I
could
was like,
certainly afford to pay better.
yeah, right. I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, a lot of people have probably seen the news about how big the endowments of these universities are, and how much they have in real estate, and it's just like, this doesn't make sense. At the heart of it is people who want to share knowledge and other people who want to receive it. But it's, as I said before, it's almost like, and these institutions have become credentialist institutions that are hedge funds with a side of education, right? So for me, I think it was an interesting experiment in jailbreaking that and saying, well, what if people didn't have to go into lifelong debt? And what if, as an instructor, you could actually support yourself by going outside and kind of cutting out the middleman to an extent? And yeah, so we did our first class, 500 people, sold out in 48 hours. We're able to give people scholarships and stuff. And yeah, it's been such a cool experience. And I guess for me, it's been freeing that I don't have to worry about some, administrator getting a chilling letter from the Department of Education or the Department of Justice and being uh, investigated for teaching wokeness, or that I can freely teach and provide a space for people about Israel, Palestine, because people are really hungry for that sort of not only knowledge, but a space to be able to ask questions. So yeah, it's been it's birthing something out of, you know, community out of cancellation has been my thought.
Hmm.
Uh, and and for me, like I said, I just seeing people, well, it's cool that people actually really wanna go back to school. I have readings, I have a syllabus, I have guest speakers and everything, but it's also just really cool to see people, make friends, make connections, make, like, just like in school, like, meet new people. It's so hard to do that after you've left school, and so many of us we're busy with our jobs and busy with our families. So I do this on Zoom, right? And I let people either watch on Zoom and then watch the recordings when they can. So I tried to just make it as easy and accessible to people as possible. So yeah, it's been a lot of work, that's for sure. But it's definitely, I'd hope, provide a model of that we don't have to take a lot of this lying down, you know, and that there's no reason that, we should be banned from speaking to one another and about history and about telling people, particularly when it comes to media and particularly when it comes to race. I tell my students a lot of times, I'm like, look, like, I didn't learn this in school. Some of the stuff I did not learn until I was a journalist. So you shouldn't feel ashamed or guilty that you didn't. We're all taking remedial history, yeah? So, and it doesn't matter how many degrees you have. I have PhDs in my class. I have people with master's degrees. The youngest student is 17. The oldest student is almost 80, right? So, this is just something that um, everyone should know. I teach about the League of Nations and Woodrow Wilson and the attempt by Japan to introduce a racial equality clause at the beginning of the League of Nations, and how that was rejected actually in 1919. And for a lot of people, they're like, how do we not know this? How do we not know that there was this effort, that this was, actually a huge, huge deal for the quote unquote colored peoples of the world, and the West just ignored it, right? So it's a lot of that. It's a lot of unearthing history that we all, I think, should have known. But if I get the chance to reach more people this way. Before I was teaching 20 people, now I'm teaching 500, then to me, it's a win. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is a great way to get make something good out of something bad that was done. And and there's a have you ever thought about that there's a bit of a parallel, although talk about structural inequality, between what you're doing and what Barry Weiss is doing.
It's so funny you said that. I think I just posted on Blue Sky about her. Not only free press, but they're setting up, what is it, the setup of the University of Austin, that kind of
Mhm. That's what I'm thinking, yeah.
weirdo university, which is not too far from me, 2.5 hours away from me. And I did think about that, right? Like, to an extent, um, it was cool that the announcement that I made went viral to an extent about creating this out of Colombia. But I think and I write and I speak all the time about the asymmetries of resources and funding when it comes to the right and the left, or liberals and stuff. So, Barry Weiss being able to corral millions upon millions of dollars,
From
me not so
literal
much.
billionaires, yeah.
Literal millionaires. And so I'm also just like, and it's not to complain, but more so as just an observation that here was someone who, and I don't know, maybe I need to learn her dark arts and I should study her instead of complaining. But rather, it's so stark to me that um you know, she was able to corral the resources and funding to be able to do something like that. Whereas, I'm doing this still largely on my own and very much grassroots supported. So, and again, it's not just me, but I'm sure you saw the kerfluffle over liberal influencers receiving money for promoting, kind of, or not even promoting, but rather just receiving money, receiving $8,000 a month, some of them. And meanwhile, again, Barry Weiss reportedly, we'll see what makes out of it, reportedly being offered hundreds of millions of dollars to be absorbed into CBS. So it's just sort of, I mean, I can I can whine, or we can whine about the right, and they're doing this and doing that, but I've seen firsthand, particularly in my own reporting in Texas, that they put their money where their mouth is, literally, literally. Seeing how millions of dollars gets poured into school board elections, gets put into folks like Barry Weiss and these podcasters, and they seem to actually, maybe they actually the right believes in what they're doing so much so that they're willing to fund it. So there are times when I'm like, does the left believe in what they're doing? Right? What's the starkest, what's the best way to show that you're committed to something, which is putting resources and cash behind it? And until the left sort of works that out, I'm not sure how we match what the right is doing. We have to stop being afraid of power, right? And not just like moral victories, and not just, but actual, you need cash, you need organizing power, you need discipline. It's not enough just to be right. You also have to be resourced and organized, and it's something that like fills me with dismay like when people seem
Mhm.
to think that if you care about human rights, or if you care about social justice, there's this self-defeating narrative that, like, you'll never make money doing it, it'll never work, we're supposed to be scraping for pennies all the time. And I'm just like, I don't think that helps our side.
Mhm.
Martin Luther King, all of these people understood and believed in power. You have to have that in order to advance your values and in order to persuade people effectively of your vision. Without that, then, you know, mm, then you'll lose.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's just me.
Yeah.
I-
Well, you're, yeah, no, that's a really, really important point. And I think you're right that in the broader left, it's not something that people get because, like I think in some ways they took the wrong lessons from the civil rights
Mm,
movement, because the civil rights movement was a multi-pronged political movement that not only were they just out there, protesting in the street, stop mistreating us, and so they were also seeking political power. They were running candidates. They were endorsing people. They were giving money to candidates.
mhm,
They were, putting people into, getting people into judgeships. Like they were pushing at all levels of
yeah,
political power in American society, and it wasn't
mhm,
just simply, please stop being mean to us. Please stop hurting us. And obviously, that was important to let people know that this was happening. But if,
mhm.
if all you're doing is saying, please stop hurting us, you're not going to win.
You're not going to win, and like it or not, we're in this sort of uh, political apparatus where largely there are two parties, and I don't think about this as only an electoral politics issue. But that being said, regardless, whether it's putting more money towards a media apparatus, whether it's thinking through, how do we actually build better institutions, right? I mean, that's not explicitly politics, but it is political. Um, you need resources, you need power, and people. I have these conversations with people who seem to think that power is bad. Power is neutral. It depends on what you do
It's what
with
you make
it.
of it. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
what you make you it's what you make of it. It's like, anyone who likes superhero movies or comics aren't like, "Oh my gosh, Superman is bad because he has power." Like, he used it to help save cities, even if it's flawed or whatnot. Any of the heroes, right? Like, so I think about these things. I think about these things a lot, and it will require a lot of people to have like almost like very personal kind of relation, like conversations with themselves about like their own narratives about power and why they think they don't deserve it or shouldn't have it. And because the right definitely thinks they should. Whether it's divine power, some of like plenty of them are motivated by literally God told them to do this. And so this is what we're going to do. Or again, some sort of deep seated conviction that this is the world you want to live in. And in order to build that, you need power. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, it is a really good point. And we were talking before this, I think that part of why you were able to really understand this on such a gut level is that you're from Texas, you're from
Mhm.
Dallas, and you have seen up close for all of your, for so many years of your life that this is what these people want. They want to do terrible things to society. And
Yeah.
you've seen that. You saw this coming a long time before. And whereas I think a lot of people in the kind of, commentariat of the left, and the political operative class and the donor class and the politician class, they don't have direct contact with
Mhm.
these right wing extremists the way that you personally have. And I think that
Mhm.
that's a big part of your analysis here. And it's also a big part of why they don't understand how to deal with Trump effectively, I think. Because, when you think about when the Republicans are in the congressional minority, they're still able to cause all sorts of problems,
Mhm.
and including government shutdowns. Like hell, they shut down the government when Trump was the president. The congressional
Mhm.
Republicans did. So like, and yet the Democrats are not willing to exercise they constantly talk about, oh, we have to protect democracy. We have to, this is a national emergency. Trump's a wannabe dictator. Well, if that's true and you really believe that, then why aren't you shutting down the government and demanding to protect people's healthcare, or a variety of things like protecting their vaccines from RFK Jr. Or just demanding the restoration of all these funds that were illegally impounded
Mhm.
against all these agencies. Like $500 million stolen from cancer vaccines. Like, if Americans knew about that, they would be really upset. But as you're not the president, so you don't have the bully pulpit. But if you shut down the government, people are going to be covering what you have to say.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, I think there's a lot of things going on in terms of, well, two things. It's like it's almost sometimes like not only not believing in your own values, so not being committed in that, but it's almost like a disbelief that Republicans are gonna, or conservatives are gonna do what they say they're gonna do. And they've been saying that they've wanted to end abortion access for what, 50 years almost, or at the very least 40-ish years. um and being willing to align with the religious right in order to achieve that. A lot of this, for a good chunk of America's history, abortion wasn't as salient an issue as it is now, and that was deliberately done through explicit alliances. And again, resources, money, and them saying that I grew up in these churches, and the alignment of political figures and the religious anti-abortion kind of movement, where ever since I was a kid, they're like, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. We're going to overturn Roe v. Wade. And it's almost like the left being like, "Ugh, that can't happen. Ugh, that can't happen." And I think for me, growing up in Dallas, or actually where I am right this second, it's like, are you like, why? And it's not just what Republicans say they're going to do. They organize, they give money, they are doing the thing. And so they've been praying for this. And so I think for me, it's, and not just praying for this, but altering the rhetorical battlefield, winning the narrative, I suppose, on these issues, having very simplistic narratives about any of their issues, right? And it's very hard. I see it quite often. The left's either ceding narrative grounds, or just simply not believing that these people will do what they want to do. They are willing to play the 50-year game.
Yeah.
um, and I remember asking even some of my as we were talking beforehand, I grew up in the evangelical church. I was I was a youth leader, used to play piano for the youth groups, was very deeply involved, I'll say that. And I remember, and then I left the church when I was in grad school, actually. And then I remember asking or observing some of my former church friends, like, why did they vote for Trump? And for a lot of them, they're like, oh, yeah, we don't really like him, but God's agenda is more important. And on God's agenda, ending abortion is what is going to save this country from going to hell, basically. So, to your point about extremism, particularly, coming from the explicitly Christian nationalist right, is, to them, they don't see it as evil. They see it as saving us. Actually, they're doing us a favor. And that trickles into even sort of, and it's hard to understand. I know for people who haven't grown up with it, but I think that also extends to even the anti-vaccine stuff that we saw during COVID, the anti-masking is, and for sure, there are plenty of people who are sadistic and want to use their power to hurt other people and believe that, these people should go to hell. I've seen that sort of vitriol, but I've also seen, and this is harder to dislodge, the people who actually think they're doing good. So even with the vaccines, talking to folks, they think that we who believe in science are the ones who are misguided. They're saying, God, we're trying to save you from ending your life or affecting your life early because you've been lied to by science. So it actually is pretty compelling because it seems to come from a deeply sincere place, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, not, and it's again, it's so easy to caricature these folks as like, ugh, they're just stupid or they're just ignorant. But at least from what I've seen, it's like I've seen people who are like, "No, no, no, don't pay attention to science. I actually want to help you. Here's this other protocol, because if you do what they say, they'll shorten your life. So, and we want to help you, right? And so it's a very we're living in extremely different information, completely different information worlds, right? Completely different realities. And I don't really know exactly how that um, gets bridged, um, unless we come. I don't know. I think about this a lot, but coming at these things from a place because they're coming at this. It's weird to think about, but they're coming at it from a place of care. It's weird to think about it, but a place
Yeah,
of
a lot of them. I mean, now JD Vance, somebody like him, I don't think that's what he's saying, but
no, he's just
uh,
a craven opportunist who is basically a puppet of Peter Thiel. He has no soul or no convictions, but people like that are able to move people who do. And again, I
Mhm.
won't deny that there's not a streak of destructive nihilism, right?
In
Like,
some of them, yeah.
in plenty of them whose whole ethos is just own the libs, that they would have no sort of a reason to be if it wasn't for beating down on who they perceive to be as misguided and weaker and annoying them because we talk about we think people should not be judged on their pronouns, like, and we think that black people deserve to vote and have jobs, like, it's not there are plenty of racists and there are plenty of bigots and all of that, but um I it's hard. Uh, yes, there is a destructive streak, and there are not just religious, but even from the sort of tech billionaires who don't particularly believe in humanity, and
Mhm.
so I look at these things as being like, are you wanting to fight for a nation that is pro-human or not? Basically.
Yeah.
Um, but alas, we're not there yet.
Yeah. Well, and that point though about, yeah, that a lot of people are kind of motivated by a an altruism that has not been grounded properly.
Mm,
Like that to me is that it hits to a difference between why that we should just make sure on the broader left to distinguish between conservatives and
right.
reactionaries.
Yeah.
Like somebody like JD Vance or Steve Bannon, or Stephen Miller, like these are reactionaries. They are trying
Yes.
to tear down America and put it back to the, well, in some cases the Confederacy. It looks like they sure
Mhm.
talk about the Confederate generals a lot now.
Oh my
um,
gosh.
and but there are people who just have a more conservative moral viewpoint, and they think, as you said, that they're doing the right thing.
Mm,
um, and in a lot of ways, that separation between them and the institutions that the reactionaries are attacking, the reason why there's this gulf, I think, is that for science stopped trying to explain itself in basic terms. And
mm,
in so many of the advances that we've had in society, the people who made them forgot to bring along everyone else. So in the same and that same thing is true, I think, with feminism. That a lot
mm,
of that feminism is no threat to men. That having women being able to choose what you want to do with your life, that's also is means that men should have that choice as well.
right.
It doesn't
Right.
mean that men should not have that choice. um But and that phrase, that famous phrase of that a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. Well,
Sure.
that also works the other way around, that a man needs a woman the way that a fish needs a bicycle. In other words,
Mhm,
that you are you're worth your own. You don't need somebody to complete you. Your value comes from yourself.
mhm,
But I think in a lot of ways we kind of stop saying that, these kind of first principle arguments, because like I always see it from people saying, oh, I don't want to, scientists saying, oh, I don't want to debate some anti-vax person, because if I debate them, then I'll be giving them credibility. And it's like,
mhm.
these people have millions of followers. Like
Yeah.
they have more credibility than you. And
Mm.
among, for people who have heard of them, like more people have
Right.
heard of them than have heard of you. So who really has more credibility? Now, on the science, obviously you do, but in the public mind, they do.
Correct, and I'm glad you said that because I think right now, to deal with what's happening is like it's a battle for the public's mind, and it's no longer the case that hidden expertise is enough. If anything, the sort of hidden expertise makes people in this country sort of feel like, oh, you must have something to hide. You must not be, but right now, uh look, we're in a fight. We're in an absolute war, and part of the war for people's minds and imaginations means that people will have to get out there and explain. I mean, I think in terms of um and builds, like I said, like bring people together. Those podcasters or whoever, those people with audiences, um, hate them all you want, and we'll see where the podcast economy goes or and all that. But like what they've basically done is they've been able to bring people together through their audience, and organize them and bring them back from day to day or week to week or whatnot. So this notion that you can just stay above the fray means that you're ceding the imagination battleground to others. And I think there's a bit of, I think particularly on the left, and I'm not trying to bash the left. I've just been thinking about this a lot because again, I just think about like what does it take to deal with this, to survive this at the very basics. Some of us are literally just trying to survive all of this. Other people, who might be less targeted right now should be thinking about these things. But it's this question of not only like what are you willing to do, what are you willing to put your time and energy and resources into, but it's we're going to have to stop wanting to be perfect right now. I think there's a lot of almost like perfectionism and purity. And again, caveat, I don't certain things I don't believe are purity tests. Personally, I think when it comes to people literally living or dying, whether it's in Gaza or whether it's people whose lives are being torn apart and broken by ICE, and you say, okay, like this candidate is supporting these things, like I personally don't see people being blown apart as and caring about that as a purity test. But that being said, people are going to have to learn to work with people and engage with people that they don't like. And I'm not saying to engage with people who want to kill you because that's kind of different. But it's just like, what does it look like to actually not just talk about building broad-based solidarities across very, very, very different groups with very different kind of priorities. Um, but again, to come together and actually build power. Um, and I talked to lots of different groups amongst the sort of so-called left, and there's such wide disparities between groups who have no structural wealth, basically, who don't have the billionaires to be able to fund groups, to certain groups that or maybe you're just in the beginning stages of trying to figure out what does it look like. For instance, maybe Arab American groups who are like, okay, like this is shown we need to build actual power to advocate for the causes that we believe in. So I think that consciousness is coming because things are so bad. Yeah, uh, but yeah, we're literally and then we haven't even gotten to AI and social media platforms and how actual facts and truth are being warped. So how do you even build when we can't even agree on whether or not what we saw on our phones coming out of the White House is real, right? As well as media organizations that are not only caving but are sort of both sidesing what's happening, minimizing, averting their eyes altogether. So yeah, I think this is a time for a lot of people to be to be out there in the public sphere and be truthers to an extent. And we're gonna have to do a lot of persuasion work and a lot of like work on people's minds and how do you organize around basically, like I said, for me, I think a lot of it comes down to I want a world that does the least amount of harm to people, basically. And to, I think also, one thing the right has done is co opted the language of freedom and liberty. Whereas I think for many of us who believe in humanist causes and that people should be actually free to not have to deal with systemic oppression. I'm like, I think we're the freedom fighters, actually. It shouldn't matter whether you're trans. It shouldn't matter whether you're Latino. It shouldn't matter. You should be a free human being in this country. So I think, I think it's going to take a lot of us being kind of creative in how we frame what we're actually fighting for and about.
Yeah, that's right. And and also being able to and being willing to reach people where they are. So not
Mhm.
just so obviously, as you said, like with podcasts and things like that, definitely we need a lot more of those, and not so many of these wasteful television political ads. God, they
Mhm.
wasted like $750 million on those
Oh,
in
wow.
the campaign, the Harris campaign did, and there's
Right.
other people who probably did too. So like we need less of that, because there's no return on that investment. All that money's flushed down the toilet now. Whereas if somebody
Mhm.
had paid some of that to start, to funded people who are podcasting or start new ones, like they would still be here. We would still be getting value out of that.
Right.
So, but also, there is also, I think, in the broader left, a lack of interest in trying to talk to people in a religious way as well, and elevating people who have a religious perspective that does align with a liberationist ethos. We don't do that as much as we should, and that's a big blind spot because the majority of Americans are Christians, and
Mhm.
so if you are not willing to present voices that can speak to them in language that they are comfortable with and that resonates with them, then how are you going to get anywhere?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I again, as a former evangelical, even though it's such a powerful group and often they dominate the conversation about Christianity, they're not the only ones. There are and I don't even want to say that this is just about Christianity. There are obviously plenty of other religious groups that have been very involved in social justice and human rights in this country for a long time. Thinking about the Jewish community during especially like the civil rights movement, the Quakers, the I know of very influential imams who are here in Dallas who are obviously very vocal about social justice and human rights. And these are people, these are churches, these are institutions that again are able to connect people and their politics to a bigger, a larger picture, something bigger than themselves. And as humans, that is just how we find meaning and significance. And that's what gives people the sort of stamina, the spiritual stamina to not only fight for what they believe in, but to sustain it for a long time. Like I said before, with abortion and Christianity, when people believe that they're working on this sort of eternal project to save people from damnation and hellfire, that's a pretty powerful reason. Now I know it's gonna what people are gonna say, and what's gonna happen is people are like, oh, keep religion out of politics, keep spirituality out of politics, particularly with the church and particularly with religious spaces that have not been welcoming to particularly LGBTQ people. All that is very, very, very much there, but there are religious groups explicitly, and again, I'm sitting here in Dallas, Texas, which actually has the largest LGBTQ megachurch in the world. And they have long been fighting for justice and human rights here. There are these groups that are like, this is not what we believe, or even some that they're like, okay, we don't understand this, but we believe in your right to be safe. Right. So I just think about that a lot, that whether it was Malcolm X and Islam, or Martin Luther King Jr., and of course, himself being a pastor, I am not sure how there would be a successful civil rights sort of counter to what's happening without people not only tapping into a deeper sort of spiritual well and community, but just the very basic pragmatic organizing power of religious communities. These are groups that are able to amass people in person, usually every week, right? To be able to come together. They're able to collect money and channel resources into projects. Uh, they have, and not only an infrastructure, but ties in their communities that political consultants flying in from Washington D.C. just don't have. And so I think about that a lot. And again, back to, I think there has been this disdain for religion. But in this country, this is what motivates people. Spirituality, spiritual groups, working in concert with one another in order to advance their view of the world. So we'll see. I'm very, even though I'm no longer, I think, like practicing Christian, I find myself as being from that culture, right? And I see the power of it. And to me, again, I'm just interested in how do we use power? And if that comes from places we may be uncomfortable with, are we going to place our discomfort over progress or over building power? A lot of people have to answer that for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's also that the other thing about churches is that they help build community of a
Mhm.
place where you don't have to be alone in this world,
Mhm.
because people move now so much for their jobs. Like they're in a city and they don't know anybody, they don't know
Yeah.
their neighbors are never home, they're never home, like they just there it's very difficult to meet people, at
Mhm.
once you're not in going to college anymore. And then, of course, the majority of Americans never went to college.
Mhm.
And so, like, for them, those connections stopped when they stopped going to high school. And so, like, so religions do provide that kind of anchoring in a lot of ways. And there's an interesting dynamic with regard to Black Americans, that for
Mhm.
Black Americans, the stats have shown that Black Americans who don't go to church are actually more Republican.
Mhm.
And they're the only demographic group where that's the case, non-religious Black Americans. And it's
Mhm.
because the political culture of the Black church, by and large, it teaches the history of, this is why we are voting, so tending to support. I mean, it's not even necessarily supporting the Democrats. This is why we are suspicious of the Republicans, because here is how they've hurt our community in
Mm.
history, and you should know it. And like, so this shared space, the shared history that you get, like that's so much of the, I feel like the appeal of Trumpism for a lot of people is that they do get to feel like that they're part of something, that
Yes.
they're part of a community that, and like from to a lot of us on the outside, that we look at that and they're like, who the hell would want to be a part of worshiping that turd? um,
But you're onto something. Like, I
yeah,
mean, and I think I wrote about it on Facebook at one point. I wish I had written a sort of deeper essay. I've had the, is it a privilege, an experience? I don't know, being in the room with Trump personally at this point 3 times in my life. And what people need to understand, have you ever met him or
I
like
have been
been
in
in
the
a room
room with
with him?
him. Yeah.
You have. Okay.
Mhm.
So maybe what I say won't be so surprising. This was my take when he met with the Washington editorial board, and I was in that room. And
Mhm.
Trump has a charisma, has a larger than life like presence. Like this man is like a large human being. So there's that. He is tall. He takes up space, and I saw him sort of work the room. And again, this is someone who's been in the sort of the public culture for a long, 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 long time. Those in New York, yes, will say, "Oh, we've always hated him. We've always known he's a crook." All of that. But for those of us who grew up outside of New York, I grew up with Trump being a showman, being on Home Alone. He was in Sex and the City. He was in music videos. And then I
And of
watched a
course,
lot
The
of pro
Apprentice.
wrestling.
Yeah.
Yeah, The Apprentice. And then, of course, The Apprentice. So he grew up, or I grew up with Trump as a rich reality TV show, like almost like this kind of brawler, man who still represents power, right?
Well, and
Like
he had a lot of crossover with hip hop too. Like
a lot
he
of
was getting
crossover
name
with hip
checked
hop.
all the time.
Yeah, Limp Bizkit. I'm still thinking of Limp Bizkit's break stuff video. He was in the break
50
stuff.
Cent
So he
also
had
talked about him all the time.
Yeah,
Um,
so he built in a way a sort of a profile, a coalition of people from pro wrestling fans to to hip hop to Sex in the City, which is supposed to be this feminist like uh cultural artifact. Yeah. Anyway, point is like to see him then come in person, he knows how to work people. He has a personal like magnetism and power that I feel a lot of people on the left don't understand. So I remember being in those rooms and thinking just the way that he made people kind of like, he's funny also, he made people laugh, like he made, and I just remember thinking, and then he went into a bunch of lies and a bunch of like nonsensical things, and I was like, oh, here we go. But he charmed the room, and I remember thinking like, we are screwed if he has this level of kind of hate him or love him, or at the very least you will pay attention to him, you can't not pay attention to him. I remember thinking that, and then the second time when I really was like, oh, this man's going to win, was seeing him at the Republican National Convention, and the way that he moved that crowd, speaking about, lock her up, speaking about how terrible America was, and bringing the way that that crowd responded to him. It was a religious thing. It's almost like they had caught the Holy Spirit, what I used to see in the mega churches. And I remember coming back and seeing people just entranced. And I was like, oh my gosh, this man is going to win because he has a level of, and I know people will hate to admit it, but he's been able to win twice. Right. There's a reason why he does so many rallies like that, moves people. And to your point, and I've seen this in people I know, even close to my own family, who Trump is both a hero and an outsider. And he's both powerful and powerless, hated by the establishment. just like Jesus, right? So if you're a follower of Trump, you then by extension are also someone who is somehow, it seems twisted, but yes, marginalized. And I've seen how people felt, particularly in the beginning, that they couldn't be out and open with saying that they liked Trump. So it's almost like they would have like almost sort of secret chats with one another.
That
Yeah,
was definitely
he
the
go
case, especially in Black communities, for sure.
yeah, and so now it's just that people are more open about it, right? Or are more open and comfortable. At the very beginning, if you remember, people were getting disinvited left and right for liking Trump. Like you were kicked out of, family dinner invites, so it's taboo. And now it's not so taboo. But there's this he's created a community, almost like a cult like sort of community where people who feel alienated by society in general um, gravitate towards a sense of belonging under him. Um,
For sure. Yeah,
mm,
and like and I see there's a that's a good parallel because when it comes to cults other than Trump, people have a more rational attitude in how to deal with them. So in other words, if you go and join Scientologists or some one of these other groups, people they don't necessarily impute moral failings or intellectual failings to you. They think, oh,
mm,
well, there's something that person is vulnerable right now to this message. And the problem with dealing with the cult of Trump, I think, for people who are trying to get people out of it, is that we miss that we miss that personal, not necessarily. And obviously, Hillary Clinton was right that many of them are deplorables. We got to say that, right? For sure, that's true. But it's still also the case, as you were saying, that a lot of people are not supporting him for malicious reasons. Like they have their own reasons that might not be terrible. Like we might disagree with them, but like and so like, and I think that that's another thing that you get as somebody who is from Texas, that you have Trump fans in your family. You
mm,
understand that these are not evil people, and I think that there's, well, not necessarily evil, and like there's a problem with, I think, with a lot of center to left people, that they want to compromise with the elites of Trumpism. Those people, you can't compromise with them,
no,
because they are irredeemable. Like they're the
they should
ones,
have known. Oh, those are evil. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Like and like they don't get that the outreach should happen at the personal, voter or citizen level. That's where we need the compromise, the outreach, the talking, and the care. Like we don't, you don't gain anything by saying, oh, let's understand Stephen Miller, and maybe he's a good guy underneath it all. And it's like, no, we don't have to do that, but we do have to think about the people that are tricked by him. And I think that,
Yeah.
that's the right emphasis, I think.
Yeah, I think there are like the folks like Stephen Miller, who is it, Peter Thiel, Alan Carr, like the ones who are actually, in my opinion, the ones who should be dragged out to debate floors. Those are the ones that are actively shaping the society and in these sort of dark rooms with their very a, a sociopathic mentalities, and I think that's why I don't, I've never loved the sort of hyper focus on the kind of Trump voters in a diner sort of thing, because even Trump himself, who is he listening to? Who is he influenced by? Who is he being used as a vessel for? What are we being like, to an extent? How is Trump? I won't say exactly being used as a distraction, but definitely being used to advance
As a puppet,
certain.
yeah.
Yeah, like, you know, he's a showman, but he's not this evil genius. We actually have evil geniuses in this society who are able to sort of operate, I think, largely outside of public view. Those are the ones who do not deserve rest, right? Like, and it's I find it strange that sort of there's this wanting to beat up on the tomato cans of like most a lot of people, like sort of low information voters, and we haven't even discussed like Fox News and its dominance in the right wing, media sphere and all that. But that aside, to me, the people who are advancing a white supremacist society with no checks and balances, who actually have openly said they do not care for democracy, basically, who have actively said, I mean, Vance has said this, that he believes that the endowments of the higher ed colleges or elite colleges are basically war chests for the enemy. Like, this is how these people speak, and for some reason we are so hyper focused on the people that it's in some ways like easier to beat up on than those powerful folks, right? And part of it is that's just how power works. It operates in the dark and operates in the shadows. And again, this is where the media should have been better in directing our attention and our span on who these people, not only who these people are, but how do we oppose not only who these people are, but they have a lot of money and are using their money and their influence to literally buy candidates, to buy media. So it's yeah, I mean, obviously the game of politics is you're supposed to persuade as many people as possible to punch the ticket in your favor. There is that. But the other realm of politics is the uh, manufacturing of narratives and the advancing of worldviews, and them deciding who's going to be the useful vessel for their business interests, all of that stuff. But that's just very hard to communicate very well to people who are in this society, especially just trying to get by on multiple, sometimes a lot of times multiple jobs. The economy's not so great right now. How do you even think about convincing people to think about these sort of higher brow issues when they're just trying to A, put food on the table, and B, realizing that if they miss a day of work, it could leave them on the street, right? And to me, we're in an age as well where power and money is so concentrated at the top, and Americans in general are getting poorer and poorer, more housing insecure, more food insecure. Um, and yet we have so much access to information, and yet literally in so many ways we are poor, particularly as middle class. We're no longer, my generation especially and below, no longer thinking that the American dream is within reach. Home ownership, marriage, kids. So to me, it's also, I mean, I think a lot of these things are deeply spiritual questions, but I think it's also about what is the narrative of America now? What is the story of America now? I'm not sure that the Republicans have a compelling one right now. Rather, it's been, as you said before, obstruction, and let's beat the liberals, and let's be reactionary and claw back progress from groups. But overall, what is the vision?
Yeah,
um, what is the vision
from
from
any
either side?
side.
From
Yeah.
any side?
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think the only way that that vision can develop, toward a anti-fascist direction is we have to reorient ourselves as well, and that kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning of the recording here. That not just about understanding power is important and why you should use it, but also what do you want,
What do
and
you want?
and
Yeah.
what and like and like I think so much of the Trump second term is about kind of this sort of desire to emotionally blitzkrieg
Mm,
everyone who opposes them, and to make people think, oh, fascism is inevitable, totalitarianism, this is our fate in America. I'm just going to sit back and doom scroll on whatever websites I'm using, and that's what they want you to think.
yeah.
And so, like, we have to figure out, what is watching the news a form of of entertainment? Like, is that why you do it, or is it
Mm,
because you want to do something? Um,
mm. Right. And it's I have a lot of thoughts about this, but I mean, I think very generally, um it's a profound shift that will need to happen within people themselves and within the society. I think a lot about how I come from a more like a sociology background, so like I think a lot about how our country and our economy is very much a consumerist economy. Very much on anytime something is going wrong for America, our leaders come out and tell us to go buy, 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 and that we can somehow rely on others to create the things and we consume the things, which means it's very easy for activism and resistance to be packaged in such a way that it looks easy so that we can consume it on our phones. Same with news. Like just speaking as someone from the information peddling business, which is journalism. But that part of the reason even that I wanted to go into teaching right now is that we are people are consuming this information, but not necessarily being able to have the opportunity to figure out how to apply that knowledge in their own lives. How to like I said, I think it's back to the drawing board with a lot of things. I think we all need re-education in so many ways on how we got here, but it's going to require Americans in general to get out of a very passive consumer consumptionist attitude towards how towards a better society. We're not going to buy our way out of this. Yes, we're going to need to pool and organize resources. That takes a lot of work. And I think for a long time, particularly the white majority in this country, has relied upon Black people to do the organizing and to do the labor, has relied upon learning from the marginalized groups. And now we're in a situation where like white folks are going to have to learn how to be in community and to organize and to probably abandon a lot of this cultural preferences for perfectionism for well if I'm too scared, I don't want to get something wrong, so I'm not going to do anything at all. I'd rather just sit on the sidelines because I'm just going to let others speak. And I'm like, you have to get out there and try. Right, because so many people we're facing, particularly for Black people, but I think for a lot of targeted groups, it's like a lot of people are literally having their livelihoods blown apart right now, and we're seeing decades of losses ahead of us. So some people are just trying to survive, but the others who really have the stamina and the privilege, like it's not the time to crash out and wait for somebody else to do the social justice hard labor of it all. They'll have to. And yeah, some of it'll be protesting, fine. Some of it will be civil disobedience, fine. Some of it will be, it'll have to come in a lot of forms, and we don't all have to do the same thing. Not everyone can be a general, not everyone can be a pilot, right? But yeah, it's going to take a profound and a different way of thinking, um, of how we do things. Again, it will come down to, do you really believe, what is the story that you believe in America, and what are you willing to do to make that a reality? Instead of, yes, just sitting, on the internet or just doom scrolling. And people are doing the work. People are doing the work and have been on the grounds. Again, being in Washington, seeing neighborhoods rising up against ICE, actively driving folks out using lawsuits, using whatever levers of power that they have. So it's the work. A lot of that work is being done, um, and I think that there's room for, or a necessity for, putting more of those stories out there, because a lot of the stories out there are about how terrible things are, what the Trump administration has done, what they're doing. It's not to say that that's not important, but like, there are stories of people who are fighting back, and who are doing what they can to protect the marginalized. So, and just examples from history and from around the world, like, we need hope as well. We definitely,
Yeah.
at the very least, need to see examples, embodied examples, even, well, credit where credit is due. If I'm remembering correctly, the Epstein list, the accusers, having very real fears of retribution and being sued into oblivion if they speak. But I believe, and you may correct me, if is it Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massey, maybe, being willing to use their powers of speaking, on the floor, basically, like finding like a loophole in some of the procedural protocols to be able to still get that information out there. Yes, these are Republicans. I do not, but it was not even just that Republicans. These are just people who but credit where credit is due. It's like, all right, they're being creative. This is what resistance could look like. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just am very, and it's gonna have some uncomfortable conversations. What do we do with the Marjorie Taylor Greene, who all of a sudden is kind of criticizing Trump or saying the right things about Gaza now? Um, what do we do with figures like that who are like, oh, are they turning the page? Are they turning the corner? Are could they be allies on this issue? I don't know. A lot of people will recoil at that, but these are the really difficult questions when you're also looking at, like, okay, where does hope like come from?
Yeah. Yeah. There are lots of questions that need to be asked for sure. And we'll keep asking them. Well, so we're just over an hour here in the recording here. So I try to, we could do this a lot longer, obviously, clearly.
Sure.
But we don't want to do that to the audience. But for people who want to keep up with your stuff, Karen, what are your recommendations for them?
Sure. You can also follow me on Substack, at Karen Attiah, .substack.com, and my Substack is called The Golden Hour. And I'm on all the social media platforms, first name Karen, last name Attiah. And for those of you who are interested in taking my class on race, media, and international affairs, I will be hosting a fall session beginning October 6th and October 8th. So you'll be able to see me lecture and see me do my thing and be with a merry band of resistance students who are coming to, and we talk a lot about these very issues that we discussed today, right? When it comes to learning from history and how media has both helped and hurt um, resistance movements. And it's just a good time. It's a great group of people. So would love to have folks sign up and come be in school with me.
All right. Sounds good. All right. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Matthew. I appreciate it.
All right. So that is the program for today. I appreciate you joining us for the conversation. And if you want to get more, you can go to theoryofchange.show, where we have the video, audio, and transcript of all the episodes. And we also have paid and free subscriptions as well. If you want to support the show and stay in touch, that would be great. We have an option on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/discoverflux, and you can go to flux.community for the Substack option as well. And if you're watching on YouTube, please do click the like and subscribe button to get notified whenever we post a new episode. That would be awesome. Stay in touch. I'll see you next time.